Welcome to Warrior Money, the show devoted to supporting our brother and sister veterans in business. I'm Patrick Murphy.
And I'm Dan Kunze.
In just a few minutes, we'll be joined by SECOR Asset Management Advisor Andrew Bang. But first, let's take a look at the issues that matter to our veterans today. A couple of weeks ago, the VA reported that veteran suicide rate has seen a slight increase. Dan, what does this tell us?
Yeah, the report suggests that over 2021 to 2022, the rate just slightly increased over that time period. It's losing about 47 veterans a day was the statistic. What I think is really interesting about that, though, is like in the previous years, it had been 4% per year increase. So while we don't want to see any increase whatsoever, like what we are seeing is that perhaps some of the work that we've done to get to the root source, like mental health, homelessness, some of the other leading factors that we've talked on before, are maybe starting to get to a place where you're starting to get to get a little bit out in front of it, at least slow it down a little bit. It doesn't show 4%; it shows a little bit slighter than that. So like maybe we are starting to figure it out a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, there was a decrease with suicide with women veterans, an slight increase with male veterans. But, there's been big pushes. I'm the honorary chair of the Face to Fight initiative. So giving people hope that there is things that you could do, whether you're a veteran in need or whether you're a family member. And, we tell people to go to, wefacetofight.org, that, there's a stigma behind it, but it's just like your physical health. Mental health is tied to your physical health, and to go to get counseling before you need it, to be proactive.
Yeah, I mean, we talk about this often. We also talk about this private-public partnership that we care so much about. Like, it isn't the government's not going to solve this problem on its own. We really need to engage industry, and we engage other partners, both nonprofit and for-profit, to support this issue. So, like, if there's a care facility and they have a bed available, we should be able to make that facility available to a veteran to support that. And what we're learning is that it's there, it exists. They just have to be able to understand and utilize that as benefits.
Yeah, and I think
not even benefit. I'm sorry, the ability to care for them.
No doubt. Yeah, and I think that's what we'll see in the future, like these more public-private partnerships. And when you have this Face to Fight initiative, it's led by obviously Humana, USAA, Reach Resilience. I think it's giving people hope that over the 200 partners, they're saying, hey, we want to partner with the government when possible, but let's get after it as all Americans. Let's not have a whole of government approach, but a whole of nation approach.
Yeah, I mean, and then so many of the things that we talk about and all of our guests talk about, it's like, how do we know the government on its own can't solve the problem. We also have to get an engaged citizenry in the citizenship. And then we have to find our purpose as we're doing that. So we're learning all these things. But I think what it really comes down to is like some of the benefits and some of the programs are working. We're starting to slow things down. And those areas that are working really well are ones that have like supportive citizens and support of the private sector that are helping solve these bigger problems, because it's the only way it scales.
Joining us today is an investment management executive whose journey has taken him from West Point to Cornell to his current role as an advisor at SECOR Asset Management. Please welcome Andrew Bang. Andrew, welcome to Warrior Money.
Thank you, Patrick. Appreciate it. Lovely to be here today.
Yeah. Well, listen, we're here at our headquarters here in New York City, and we always lead off our show with the bottom line up front. So bottom line up front, what advice would you give to transitioning veterans who want to go into financial services here in New York City?
Yeah, Patrick, thanks for asking that question, because indeed that is a very important question to transitioning military veterans. It is important, I think, during this transition to find out about yourself and the opportunities that's ahead of you. In particular, in finance, I think there's an impression that, hey, I want to be an investment banker so I can make some money, or I want to be a hedge fund manager. Well, absolutely. But there's quite a bit of opportunities ahead of you in finance, whether it's investment management, whether it's investment banking, whether it's in technology in the world of finance, whether it's investor relations. And so for those of you transitioning from the military, I would highly suggest that you talk to people, ask other veterans who are in that space, get advice, find out about investment management, finance, accounting, the various opportunities that's afforded to those transitioning veterans in finance. And so I certainly would encourage that, having that conversation, finding out what you would like to do. And it may not be a hedge fund manager
Yeah.
or an investment banker. It may be on the technology side, making things happen,
Yeah.
or perhaps even on the operations side. And there are lots of asset classes and lots of functions within the world of finance. And so I encourage you to educate yourself and find out what you have an interest in. And from an education standpoint, also higher education, whether it's an MBA, CFA certifications, and other credentials might be helpful.
Yeah, and Andrew, we're going to get there. I think so. Dan and I, when we advise transitioning veterans, we say two things. First, plan your work and work your plan. And what you mentioned, like your network. Your network is your net worth, right? So utilizing force multipliers like LinkedIn and reaching out for informational interviews, for a 10-minute, 15-minute Zoom call to figure out before you land there. So how did you, go to SECOR Asset Management? How was that process, and what do you do for them?
Sure. So, when I transitioned from the military, by luck, I ended up in investment banking, started out at Swiss Bank, UBS back then, and then transitioned to private equity with GE Capital's private equity group, and then into GE Asset Management pension group. And so from that journey, I was able to start my own investment management firm called Drexel Hamilton Investment Partners and launched a hedge fund and 6 mutual funds. And upon transitioning from Drexel Hamilton Investment Partners, I ended up at SECOR Asset Management. SECOR Asset Management is a strategic investment advisor to large corporate pensions, foundation endowments, and insurance companies. And what we do is provide investment advisory, consultancy, as well as high level, as well as a specific manager selection, asset allocation, as well as certainly solutions for the institutional clients that we work with. And we oversee and advise over $30 billion of our institutional client assets. And that's, what I've, over the years, with my experience, have ended up at SECOR.
It's interesting you say that. We had Admiral Craven in your chair, one of our first episodes, and he talked about transitioning purpose from the military life and into his business life, and how you have to shift your mindset on the mission. So like, I hear you say what you do at SECOR, and I also hear that you're working with public pension institutions and other organizations that have a real mission-driven, purpose-driven purpose behind the work that they do. I'd love to hear a little bit more about how you think about transitioning purpose from the military side into the work that you're doing right now and how you find that purpose there.
Yeah, absolutely. So SECOR advises pension clients primarily, certainly other large institutional clients. But, to your point about having that purpose, right? What we do, we have a fiduciary responsibility to our clients and to the pensioners of these organizations. And so what we do, we look at from a long-term investing. We're not looking at taking the ups and in the stock market, a short-term investing and trading. We are looking at liabilities that's 10, 20, 30 years out. And so when folks work for a company, a large organization, and from a pension standpoint, we ensure, we certainly endeavor, perhaps is a better word, to make sure that their pension benefits are available when they do retire at whatever that point may be.
But how about you as a soldier? You and I served in Germany in the 90s, but you got out. Did you leverage a GI Bill to go to Cornell, or how did you use the benefits you earned?
Yeah, and so unfortunately, I didn't qualify for that GI Bill, where this is something that certainly post 9/11 service members have been able to take the benefit from. I actually worked and took out a loan.
The old-fashioned way.
So do we. Don't apply to us neither.
The old-fashioned way.
Right. And I applied to the various MBA programs, and fortunately, I was accepted into Cornell, and I attended Cornell University for the MBA program. And so, yeah, certainly, again, my other point earlier was like education. learn, and that was a great way for me to transition. Certainly having the fundamentals from West Point in terms of my Bachelor of Science was great, having the foundations. But I also realized that there are gaps. Right. Unfortunately, at West Point, there's no classes on mutual funds or investment banking or accounting. So I was able to, attend and get my MBA and fill in some of those holes in finance.
We talked a little bit about your experience in Germany and the Army. I'd love to hear a little bit more about the things that you learned there and how you've transferred them into your career, even early career to mid career to where you are now. I'd love to hear that. How was your military experience influential? What did you take from it? What are you learning? And how did you go from there?
There's never a dull moment, right? No. When you're serving our country, and it is always about learning. Education, right? Whether it's book learning or actual on-the-job training, where those are the things that I've taken to myself and over my transition to the civilian career, where always learning about the markets, always learning about the geopolitics of what's going on in the world, learning about different products, right? As well as being able to teach that. Right, as a senior, whether senior enlisted or as officers in the military, in the Army, you're also teaching your soldiers and training with all of them. So it is about education, training, and constantly being able to improve yourself and your team around you to be a more effective team in accomplishing your goal.
Bring others along with you.
Yeah, they say when you train, when you educate others, you learn twice.
Yeah.
So we're going to dive into that when we get back after the break. So we'll see you in just a second. All right, welcome back to Warrior Money. We're joined by Andrew Bang, advisor at SECOR Asset Management. Andrew, we were talking about your time at West Point, how you went to Cornell, how you worked your way, got loans, et cetera. But let's talk about a purpose-driven life, right? You and your brother both joined the military. You're immigrants to our nation. And what did that set you on a path to live a purpose-driven life?
Yeah, thank you for that question. We're products of an immigrant family. Our family went to the United States when I was 8 years old, and my younger brother, obviously, as well. And so we came here for the quintessential American dream, right? To work hard for the opportunities and to become a success and better yourselves in the family. And so, growing up, my parents sacrificed everything to come here legally as an immigrant. And so we were afforded the opportunities to go to a good school, have the opportunities to play sports, to join clubs, and to do all these things so that we can become successful during our high school years and so forth. And that, I think, has allowed me back then to really appreciate and be grateful for the opportunities that were afforded us. And so that was my motivation to apply and to go to West Point, to become an officer in the U.S. Army, to give back to our country. Certainly that was the strongest motivator. Certainly the education that was afforded to us at West Point, a top-tier school, as well as to become a better leader, representative of our peers attending the service academy.
Yeah, I'll never forget being a young captain and my first time to join the faculty at West Point to teach there over 20 years ago. It's just breathtaking. But I think my favorite quote about West Point was Colin Powell, who did ROTC like I did, but he said, you can't leave West Point without the love of country stamped on your heart. And it just resonates today.
We definitely see that in the work that you do with both Benz and the USO. We both know each other from both of those organizations.
Right.
So can you share with the audience what is Benz and what is the USO and why do you feel like you contribute your time to it?
Absolutely, and that's my way of continuing to give back to our country. Although I've transitioned from the military service to the private sector, I've always been active in these volunteer organizations. Benz, that you mentioned, Business Executives for National Security, is an organization of senior executives of various companies to connect with the military and to our country, to have dialogue right? To have conversations to understand, right? The government, military, as well from a national security standpoint, with the corporations and of our country and globally. USO stands for the United Services Organization, founded at the tail end of World War II, and it certainly is very famous for Bob Hope. I think I'm dating myself here by mentioning Bob Hope, but certainly the mission of the USO is to support the active duty military and their families, especially when the troops are deployed overseas. In terms of providing support, bringing a little bit of home to our troops when they're deployed, as well as taking care of the families. And so, from that standpoint, I'm very active with these nonprofit and volunteer organizations to continue to give back in a cause that's near and dear to my heart. Yeah.
One of the I love working in this national security, government, business, and industry spaces, and I'm from my perspective in the USO and the Benz, I get to see, like, every time I feel like I know how big the United States national security apparatus is, or the government is, or the industries that we are, like, I find out a whole new thing that we do. Can you talk a little bit about your perspective on DoD scale, some of the challenges they have right now on meeting the scale demand that they have?
Yes. So, based on my, I guess, activity with whether it's been USO and certainly from my former time in the military, and it is something that we all, as private citizens, we believe or think that, oh, the federal government's got lots of money, billions and billions of dollars, and in terms of whether it's military equipment, paying the troops, and it's all taken care of, right? But in actuality, even that money sometimes is not enough. From a standpoint of whether it's research and development or ensuring that our troops are taken care of and they have the housing or the facilities, the train and the training money and material to do that training. And so, from a DoD standpoint in the federal government, a lot of money is spent. But there's always an opportunity to improve upon that and to perhaps spend better or spend wisely. And so I think some of these organizations, perhaps it is perhaps an organization like Ben's, having that dialogue, communication from a national security standpoint with the private sector opens doors. That having that dialogue, I think. Creates an understanding and better awareness of some of the important work that the government and from a national security standpoint, and how the private sector perhaps can work together from a public-private partnership standpoint.
Yeah, as entrepreneurs, we've invested, our partners and I, and us, about $75 million in 62 veteran-owned companies. But a lot of these small businesses, especially emerging tech companies, they die in the valley of death, right? They can't get there because the government sales cycle is so long. What gives you promise, and what do you forecast moving forward in the future with these public-private partnerships?
Yeah, I think couple things. There's already public various programs existing. Public-private partnerships, from I think most of the listeners and viewers may have heard of, whether it's the InQtels of the world, right? DARPAs of the world, where from an R&D standpoint, these organizations invest in emerging technology, emerging innovation. And each of the services have internal R&D. But from a scaling standpoint, but from a larger standpoint, I think my understanding is that there needs to be additional partnership, more partnership, and also from a investment the finance piece of it, there are some tremendous opportunities from a return perspective, whether it's the public, private, whether it's investing in public securities, as well as from a private sector investment in private alternatives, whether it's private equity, private credit, real estate, where some of these perhaps infrastructure, government projects partnering together may allow for increased access as well as investment from a risk return perspective, which I think is important from a finance and investment standpoint to explore and continue to explore.
Yeah, we talk a lot about the valley of death, or we have the conversations as it relates to like the lack of capital. I think it's also a lack of communication. There's just like a lack of if you're in the defense or national security world and you're trying to penetrate the New York institutional world, that can sometimes feel very far away, even if it's only 150 miles by road between DC and New York. So can you talk a little? That actually goes back to our original question. Is like, how could you as a veteran get into the national security, New York finance, but also how do you think that could help in the national security space?
My personal opinion on this is that, as an example, Patrick, you and I, having served specifically in the Army, we understand, the weapon systems that we used as an example, right? Whether it's the Bradley fighting vehicles or the M16s back in the day, or the radio that we used, right? Those are equipment that we've used, and we know that it needs improvement.
No
right?
doubt.
Right. And so from a user perspective, there are lots of opportunities from that standpoint. But from a scaling standpoint of, it's not just one or two or a dozen pieces of equipment that's being produced or need to be produced. We're talking scale of hundreds and thousands of these type of material and the various components that need to be produced. And so from that standpoint, we have certainly an understanding of that. So from a private sector, having worked with, certainly from your perspective, with the government and various agencies. From a private sector, from an investment standpoint, yes, we invest in companies and organizations for growth, for innovation. And so similarly, there are dual use cases for the technology, as an example, that's used by the military, from a national security standpoint. Whether it's the semiconductor chips, cybersecurity, huge national security opportunities, AI, certainly digitization and data centers. All of these technologies that we, as private citizens, we all use and have access to. That's also being used and has, needs innovation and development from a national security standpoint.
Yep. Hey, we're going to go for a quick warrior Q&A and ask one question.
I got one question for you. What's some money advice that you know now that you wish you knew when you were younger?
Real quick, 30 seconds.
It is about long-term investing.
Get in
early.
Save and start early.
Yeah, save and start early. I certainly give the same advice to myself 30 years ago.
That's great. Hey, Andrew, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it. Hey, that's our show. So subscribe, review Warrior Money on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever else you get your podcasts, or find us at Yahoo Finance. I'm Patrick Murphy.
And I'm Dan Kunze. We'll see you next week.